When my son asked me that question, I didn't know whether to smile or cry. It was Mother's Day. The house smelled like roses, expensive ones, the kind you order online and have delivered in glossy wrapping paper. I sat at the corner of the big marble table in his mansion, a table so long it made me feel small. Clara, his wife, poured tea into my cup without looking at me. She was dressed in something elegant, probably worth more than everything in my little house back home. My son, Adam, leaned back in his chair and said, almost proudly, "Mom, Clara sends you $5,000 every month, right? You like it, don't you?" I looked at him, trying to read his face. He wasn't teasing, he was serious. As if money could ever replace what I'd given him. I smiled. The kind of smile that hides 1,000 unspoken things. "Yes, sweetheart," I said softly. "It helps me a lot." But inside, I felt something tighten. A quiet ache. Because in that moment, I realized my son thought of me as someone to provide for, not care for. He didn't ask if I was happy. He didn't ask if I felt lonely. He just asked about the money. I wanted to tell him, "I didn't raise you for your money, Adam. I raised you to be kind. To remember the small things, like how I used to warm your milk before bed, or wait up when you came home late from school." But I didn't say it. Instead, I looked down at the tea in my cup, watching the steam disappear. And for the first time in my life, I felt like a guest in my own son's world. After that conversation, I couldn't stop thinking about how far things had changed between us. It wasn't always like this. When Adam was little, we didn't have much, just a tiny house on the edge of town. The roof leaked every winter, and the walls were so thin that when the wind blew, it felt like the whole house sighed. But it was our home. And inside those thin walls, there was laughter, warmth, and love. I used to work 2 jobs, mornings at a grocery store, nights cleaning offices. My hands were always tired, but I never let Adam see that. I'd come home, wash my face, and pretend I wasn't exhausted. Because the moment I saw his little face light up when he ran into my arms, everything felt worth it. I still remember one night so clearly. He must have been about 7. The lights had gone out again, and we sat by a candle at the kitchen table. He was working on a school project, cutting paper stars. He looked up and said, "Mom, when I grow up, I'll buy you a big house. One where the lights never go out." And I laughed, pulling him close. "All I want," I told him, "is for you to grow up kind." He nodded seriously, the way children do when they make promises they truly believe they'll keep. Years went by. I saved every little bit I could for his education. When other mothers bought new clothes, I patched old ones. When they rested on weekends, I took extra shifts. Every small sacrifice became a quiet prayer for his future. When he got into college, the first in our family to do so, I cried for hours. I remember sitting in my room, holding the acceptance letter close to my chest, whispering, "We did it, Adam. We finally did it." He hugged me and said, "Mom, one day, I'll make you proud." And I told him, "You already have." He left for the city soon after. At first, he'd call every night. He'd tell me about his classes, his friends, how different city life felt. I'd listen, smiling quietly, picturing his world through his voice. But as months passed, the calls became shorter, then less frequent. "Mom, I'm just busy," he'd say. And I understood. Or at least, I tried to. When he got his first job, he sent me a photo, standing in front of a glass building, wearing a suit. His smile was the same, but something in his eyes had changed. It was pride. But also distance. Still, I told everyone in the neighborhood, "That's my son. My Adam." People would smile and say, "You raised a fine young man." And I believed I did. Years later, he called to tell me he was getting married. Her name was Clara. I didn't know much about her, only that she came from a well-off family. "Mom, you'll love her," he said. "She's very modern, very kind. I said I couldn't wait to meet her. But when I finally did, at their wedding, she shook my hand like a polite stranger. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Still, I told myself not to judge. Maybe she was just shy. That day, I wore a simple blue dress. It was the nicest one I owned. When I tried to hug Adam after the ceremony, Clara gently touched his arm and said, "Careful, honey, your suit." And just like that, my arms froze in the air. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't hurt. After the wedding, they moved into a big house in the city, 5 bedrooms, white walls, and the kind of silence that echoes. I was invited a few times at first. The visits were short, polite, and always a little uncomfortable. Clara would talk about vacations, designer bags, and art pieces I couldn't pronounce. I'd just nod, holding my teacup carefully, afraid of leaving a mark on their table. One day, Adam said, "Mom, don't worry about bills or anything anymore. Clara and I will send you some money every month. Just relax and enjoy your life." He smiled like he'd given me a gift. And I smiled back, because that's what mothers do. But deep down, I didn't want his money. I wanted his time. His laughter. His visits without reason. Still, I told myself, he's busy. He's building a life. Maybe that's what good sons do when they grow up. So I accepted the monthly $5,000 they sent. I used only a small part of it, for groceries, medicine, and some new curtains. The rest, I saved quietly, like a secret. I didn't tell him, because I didn't want him to feel guilty. But every night, when I sat alone with my cup of tea, I wondered if he remembered what day it was, the day his father left us, the day we almost lost the house, the day I cried in front of him for the first time. He used to hold my hand and say, "It's okay, Mom. One day I'll make everything right." I guess he did. At least, on paper. After that Mother's Day lunch, something inside me felt heavy. I went back home and sat by the window, holding the little gift box Clara had given me, a pair of earrings. They were beautiful, but I couldn't remember the last time I'd worn jewelry. They didn't suit my life anymore. I barely left the house except for groceries. For the next few weeks, Adam didn't call. I tried not to count the days, but silence has its own way of speaking. Sometimes, I'd pick up the phone, dial his number halfway, then hang up. I didn't want to sound needy. I didn't want to disturb his busy world. One afternoon, I went to the city for a doctor's appointment. By chance, I passed by Adam's office building. I stood across the street for a long moment, just looking. People in suits hurried in and out, their faces full of purpose. For a second, I thought of going inside, surprising him like I used to surprise him at school when he forgot his lunch. But then I saw him. He walked out, laughing with 2 men. His jacket was perfectly fitted, his watch shimmered in the sunlight. He looked successful, confident, distant. I wanted to call his name, but my voice stayed trapped somewhere inside me. Instead, I just watched as he got into his car and drove away. That evening, when he finally called, I didn't tell him I'd seen him. He said, "Sorry, Mom, work's been crazy. I'll visit soon, okay?" I said, "Of course, sweetheart. Take your time." After the call, I sat quietly. My tea had gone cold. The next week, Clara sent me a message, "Mom, we'll transfer the monthly amount on the 5th instead of the 1st this time. Hope that's fine." I replied, "That's fine, dear. Thank you." But I couldn't help but wonder when she started calling me only for money matters. When did our connection become a transaction? Sometimes, I'd walk to the nearby park and watch other families, parents with their grown children, laughing, sharing snacks. I'd smile at them even though it hurt. One day, a woman on the bench beside me asked, "Are you waiting for someone?" I smiled and said, "No, just getting some air." She nodded, then softly said, "You have kind eyes. You must miss someone." And I did. I missed my son. Not the man in the suit, but the little boy with paper stars and dreams of fixing our roof. A few weeks later, Clara called me. Her voice was polite, but there was something sharp hiding beneath it. Mom, Adam and I are hosting some of his business friends for dinner this weekend. We'd love for you to come, but it's a formal event. You have something nice to wear, right? I paused. My nicest dress was still that old blue one. Yes, dear, I said quietly. I'll find something. I spent the next 2 days sewing little beads onto that same blue dress, just to make it look new. My fingers trembled as I stitched, but I told myself it didn't matter. I was going to see my son. When I arrived that evening, the house was full of people. Laughter, glasses clinking, expensive perfume. Clara greeted me at the door, her smile tight as ever. Oh, you came early, she said softly, glancing at my dress. That's nice. She led me inside. Everyone was busy talking, business, travel, investments. I didn't understand half of it. Adam was at the center of the room, confident and charming. When he saw me, he smiled, but it was the kind of smile you give to a guest, not a mother. Mom, this is Mr. Daniels, my boss, he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. She's the one who taught me hard work. Mr. Daniels shook my hand warmly. You must be proud of your son. I smiled. Every day. But when Adam turned away, I noticed Clara whisper something to him. He frowned slightly, then nodded. A few minutes later, she guided me toward the kitchen. Mom, could you help the caterer with a few things? We're short-staffed. Her tone was gentle, but the meaning wasn't. So I spent most of that evening in the kitchen, helping arrange plates while guests laughed in the other room. A few of them peeked in and smiled awkwardly when they saw me. No one asked who I was. By the time dinner ended, my back ached, but I stayed silent. Adam came by for a moment, kissed my forehead, and said, "Thanks for helping, Mom. You're always amazing." And just like that, I forgave him, at least for that night. Because a mother's heart doesn't know how to hold grudges. Later, as everyone left, Clara walked me to the door. You understand, right? She said softly. It's just that we didn't want guests to feel uncomfortable. I nodded. Of course, dear. I understand. But when I stepped outside into the quiet night, tears finally slipped down my cheeks. The air was cold, but it wasn't as cold as what I felt inside. That evening, I promised myself I wouldn't visit unless they truly wanted me to. After that dinner night, weeks passed in silence again. No calls. No messages. Only bank notifications, the monthly transfer from Clara. Each time I saw it, I felt a mix of gratitude and sadness. Gratitude because they still remembered, sadness because that was all they seemed to remember. I began writing little letters to Adam, ones I never sent. Just small notes about the garden, the weather, or the neighbor's new puppy. Sometimes I'd tell him about a movie I watched, or a memory from his childhood. It made me feel closer to him, even if only in imagination. One day, my neighbor, Mrs. Hill, knocked on my door. She held a basket of cookies and said, "I saw Adam's photo in the newspaper. He's done so well, hasn't he?" I smiled proudly. "Yes, he has." She sighed softly. "You must visit him often." I didn't know what to say. So I lied. "Oh yes, every few weeks." That night, I looked at that newspaper photo, Adam shaking hands with some investors, his name printed in bold letters. He looked happy. But somewhere deep down, I wondered, did he ever think of me when the cameras weren't there? A few days later, Clara called again. "Mom, I hope you're doing well. Listen, Adam's been under a lot of pressure lately. Maybe just give him some space, okay?" Her voice was calm, but her words cut deeper than she knew. I said, "Of course. I never want to bother him." After that, I stopped calling altogether. The house grew quieter. Some nights, I'd hear the wind outside and imagine it carrying my unspoken words to wherever Adam was. Then, one afternoon, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Clara stood there, elegant as always, sunglasses covering her eyes. "Mom," she said gently, "I was nearby and thought I'd drop off some groceries." I was surprised, but happy. "That's so kind of you. Come in." She looked around my small living room, her gaze lingering on the old furniture, the faded curtains. "You really should use more of the money we send," she said softly. "This place could use a little update." I smiled. "It's okay, dear. I like things the way they are." Then she noticed the small envelope on my table, one of the letters I'd written to Adam. She picked it up and said, "You still write him letters?" I nodded. "It helps me feel close to him." Her smile faltered for a moment. Then she said quietly, "You don't have to, Mom. He gets so emotional when he reads things like that." I blinked. "He's seen them?" She hesitated. "Oh, I mean, well, sometimes he mentions you write a lot." Something about the way she said it didn't feel right. But I didn't ask further. I didn't want to start anything that might trouble Adam. When she left, I sat down and looked at that letter again. I tore it gently and dropped it in the bin. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, if my words made him emotional, wasn't that good? Didn't that mean he still felt something? But maybe Clara didn't want that. Maybe my presence, even through a letter, disturbed their perfect, quiet life. So I stopped writing too. It was late autumn when I heard from Adam again. He called one evening, his voice rushed, distracted. "Hey, Mom. Sorry it's been a while. Things are crazy here. How are you?" I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little cold these days. The roof leaks again, but I'll fix it soon." He sighed. "Mom, I told you, use the money we send. Get someone to repair it." "I know," I said softly. "I just like doing things myself." He chuckled a little, then paused. "Clara's planning a short trip to Europe with her friends. I'll probably go later for work. You'll be okay, right?" I hesitated, wanting to say, "I miss you," but instead, I said, "Of course. I always am." Before hanging up, he added, "Love you, Mom." I whispered, "Love you too," though the line had already gone silent. After the call, I sat quietly, staring at the flickering light bulb above me. His words, "You'll be okay, right?" echoed in my mind. I wondered if he ever thought that maybe I wasn't. A week later, I got sick. Just a bad flu, but it left me weak. My neighbor, Mrs. Hill, brought soup and helped me to the clinic. The doctor said I needed rest. When I got home, I thought about calling Adam, but I didn't want to worry him. I told myself he was busy. Always busy. One night, as I sat wrapped in a blanket, my phone rang. My heart leaped, Adam. But when I answered, it was Clara. "Mom, Adam's in a meeting," she said. "He asked me to check if you're okay. You haven't been active online lately." I smiled weakly. "I'm fine, dear. Just resting." "That's good," she said quickly. "Anyway, the bank will send this month's transfer tomorrow." I wanted to say thank you, not for the money, but for remembering. But before I could, she'd already hung up. The next morning, I looked at the calendar. Mother's Day was only 2 weeks away again. It made me think of the last one, of that marble table, of Adam's question. And I wondered what he'd say this year. I decided to write him a proper letter, one I'd actually send. I spent the whole evening writing slowly, carefully, pouring every unsaid word onto that paper. I told him about the garden, the roof, my health. But most of all, I told him I missed him. Not his money, not his gifts, him. When I was done, I read it out loud, my voice trembling. Then I sealed it in an envelope and posted it the next morning. Days passed. No reply. Then, one Friday afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find a courier holding a small parcel, no letter, no card, just a brand new smartphone inside with a note that said, "So you can video call us easily. Love, Adam." I stared at it for a long time. It was thoughtful, yes. But somehow, it felt like another wall between us, shiny, expensive, and silent. That night, I held the phone close and whispered, "Adam, I don't need a screen to see you. I just need you to come home." Mother's Day arrived again. I woke up early, the way I used to when Adam was little. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. I made myself a cup of tea and looked at the small vase on the table. There were no flowers in it this year, I couldn't bring myself to buy any. I told myself I didn't mind. But somewhere deep down, I hoped, just maybe, he'd remember. By noon, there was still no call. I sat by the window, watching the street. A few children passed by, carrying bouquets, laughing as they ran home to their mothers. I smiled at them, though my heart ached quietly. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. My heart jumped. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom." Adam's voice filled the room. I laughed softly, a tear slipping down my cheek. "You remembered." "Of course I did," he said. "Actually, Clara and I want you to come over for dinner tonight. She's making something special." My heart warmed instantly. "I'd love to, sweetheart." I wore my blue dress again, the one I'd mended so many times. I brushed my hair and took the bus to their neighborhood. As I walked up the driveway, I saw balloons tied near the door, and a big sign that said Happy Mother's Day. Clara opened the door. This time, her smile looked real. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," she said, handing me a bouquet of lilies. "Adam's just finishing a call. Come in." The table was set beautifully, candles, silver plates, soft music in the background. For a moment, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. When Adam came down, he hugged me, really hugged me. It caught me by surprise. "Mom," he said quietly, "you look beautiful." I smiled. "You look tired, sweetheart." He laughed. "Yeah, a little. But today's special." Dinner went smoothly at first. We talked, we laughed. Clara even showed me some old pictures of Adam from college. It almost felt like the old days. But then, as dessert came, Adam's tone shifted slightly. He looked at me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes and said, "Mom, I've been meaning to ask you something." I nodded, curious. He hesitated. "You've been saving most of the money we send, haven't you?" I blinked. "How did you know?" Clara noticed. "You barely use it." We wanted to understand why. His words were calm, but they carried an edge, not anger, but confusion. I looked down at my plate. "I just don't need much, Adam. I'm happy with what I have." He sighed. "Mom, you could live better. You could have a new house, a car, anything. Why are you holding back?" I hesitated, my hands trembling slightly. "Because I was never waiting for those things, Adam. I was just waiting for you." The room went silent. Even Clara looked away. He opened his mouth to say something, then stopped. For a moment, the confident man I knew vanished, and I saw my little boy again, unsure, lost for words. Then, quietly, he said, "Mom, I didn't know you felt that way." I smiled through the tears forming in my eyes. "I didn't want to make you feel guilty. You're doing so well, and I didn't want to take that happiness away." Adam leaned back in his chair, his expression softening. He looked at me for a long moment before saying, "Mom, I think I've forgotten what really matters." I smiled faintly. "You didn't forget, son. You just got busy living." He reached for my hand. "You always do that," he whispered. "You make it sound simple even when it's not." I could feel his hand trembling slightly. Clara sat quietly beside him, her eyes glistening. For the first time, she looked at me not with distance, but with something close to understanding. After a few seconds, she said softly, "You know, I used to think you didn't like me." I looked at her gently. "Why would you think that, dear?" She sighed. "Because you never asked for anything. Not gifts, not help, not even attention. I thought maybe you were judging me for not being enough." Her words surprised me. I shook my head slowly. "Oh, Clara. I never judged you. I just didn't want to be a burden. You already had enough on your plate." Her eyes filled with tears. "You weren't a burden, Mom. You were lonely. And we didn't see it." The room grew silent again. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any word. Then, Adam stood up and walked to the cabinet. He returned with a small envelope in his hand. "I was saving this for the end of dinner," he said quietly, handing it to me. "But maybe now's the right time." I opened it slowly. Inside was a check. A big one. "For you," he said. "It's from both of us. For everything you've done." I looked at the number, then looked at him. "Adam," I said softly, "you don't need to do this." He frowned slightly. "Mom, please. I want you to have it." I placed the check on the table and reached out to touch his face. "My son," I said, my voice trembling, "money was never the thank you I was waiting for. I just wanted to know you still needed me, even a little." His eyes welled up. He knelt beside my chair, resting his head on my lap like he did when he was a child. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I really am. I thought success would make me happy, but I forgot the person who made me who I am." I ran my fingers through his hair, smiling through tears. "You didn't forget, Adam. You just lost your way for a while." Clara came closer and wrapped her arms around both of us. "You're part of us, Mom," she said softly. "You always were. We just didn't say it enough." For the first time in years, the three of us stayed like that, together, quietly crying, forgiving, and remembering. The candles burned low. The music in the background faded. And in that stillness, I felt something heal inside me, something that had been broken for too long. Later that night, when Adam drove me home, he didn't drop me at the gate like before. He walked me all the way to my door, holding my hand like a child again. "Mom," he said before leaving, "promise me you'll never think you're alone again." I smiled. "Only if you promise to visit without waiting for holidays." He laughed softly. "Deal." He hugged me again before leaving. And for the first time in years, I felt my heart rest. The next morning felt different. The sun peeked softly through my curtains, and for once, the light didn't feel empty. I got up, made my tea, and found myself smiling without even realizing it. Adam had texted me early, a simple message that said, "Good morning, Mom. Did you sleep well?" It might have seemed small to anyone else, but for me, it was everything. For years, my mornings had started in silence. That day, it began with love. In the days that followed, Adam called me more often. Not out of guilt, but out of care. He'd ask what I was cooking, or how the weather was. Sometimes he'd just call to tell me about his meetings, his stress, or a new dish Clara had tried to make. I started feeling like a part of his life again. Not as someone waiting on the sidelines, but as a mother who mattered. One weekend, he came over with Clara. They brought boxes, full of my favorite things. Old photo albums, some of my books, a few plants, and a framed picture of the three of us from years ago. "We thought we could set these up for you," he said. "Your home should feel like you." As they unpacked, laughter filled the small house. Clara carefully arranged the plants on the windowsill while Adam tried to hang the photo frame straight. It kept tilting, and I laughed so hard that my eyes teared up again, this time from joy, not sadness. That evening, we sat in the garden drinking tea together. The light was golden, the air calm. Adam said, "You know, Mom, Clara and I have been thinking. Maybe you could stay with us for a while. Not forever, just whenever you want." I smiled at him. You mean, like old times? He nodded. Exactly like old times. I didn't answer right away. I just looked around, the small flowers, the evening breeze, the birds returning home. Then I said softly, maybe I will, someday. But for now, I'm happy right here. You both just visit often, okay? Clara reached for my hand. We promise. From that day, they visited every Sunday. Sometimes they'd bring dinner, sometimes just themselves. We'd talk about everything, movies, neighbors, life. I started baking again, something I hadn't done in years. Each visit filled a space in my heart that had been empty for far too long. One Sunday evening, as we sat watching the sunset, Adam said, "Mom, I realized something. It doesn't matter how much money I make. None of it feels right if you're not a part of it." I smiled and said, "Then maybe you've finally found what real wealth means." He looked at me, confused. "And what's that?" "Time," I said softly. "Time with the people you love." The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of the jasmine flowers nearby. For the first time, I felt truly at peace, like life had come full circle. After that evening, something gentle shifted inside me. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a quiet peace that began to live in my chest. I started waking up with purpose again. I watered my plants every morning, cooked fresh meals, and even began knitting small sweaters for the neighborhood children. Little by little, I started feeling like myself again, the woman who once loved, cared, and gave without expecting anything in return. One day, as I sat outside on the porch, Mrs. Wilson, my next-door neighbor, stopped by. She smiled and said, "You've been glowing lately, dear. What's changed?" I chuckled softly. "Nothing much, really. Maybe I just remembered how to breathe again." She laughed. "Well, whatever it is, keep it. It suits you." Her words stayed with me. Sometimes happiness doesn't arrive with fireworks or surprises, sometimes, it just walks back quietly when love returns. That week, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I took the old sewing machine out of the cupboard, the one Adam bought for me when he was 16. I cleaned it, oiled it, and began sewing again. At first, it was just for myself. But then, I started making small dresses for the children in our street. Their laughter filled my house like music. It reminded me that kindness doesn't have to be grand, it just needs to be shared. A few days later, Adam came over again, this time alone. He looked around the house and smiled. "Mom, you've changed everything. It feels so warm in here." I laughed. It's amazing what a little love and sunlight can do. He sat down beside me, watching the half-finished dress on my table. "Remember when I was a kid, you used to stay up late sewing my school uniforms?" he asked. "I remember," I said softly. "You'd fall asleep on the couch, and I'd cover you with a blanket before finishing your buttons." He smiled. "I used to wake up just to see if you were still there." I looked at him, touched. "And were you disappointed when I was?" He laughed gently. "No, Mom. I was comforted. Because I knew you always would be." For a moment, we just sat there, no words, no noise. Just peace. Before he left, he handed me a small envelope. "Don't worry," he said with a grin, "it's not another check." Inside was a handwritten note. It said, "Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I forgot to look back. You taught me what love really is, patient, quiet, and unconditional." Tears filled my eyes. I looked up, but he was already at the door. He turned around, smiled, and said softly, "I love you, Mom." I whispered back, "I love you too, my son." When he drove away, I stood at the doorway for a while, holding the note close to my chest. The world felt softer that evening, the sky painted in orange and gold, the air filled with the sound of birds returning home. I realized something important. You can't force people to love you the way you love them. But if your love is pure, it finds its way back. Maybe not in the same form, but always at the right time. A year passed quietly after that night. Life had found a new rhythm, calm, kind, and full of little joys. I still lived in my small house, surrounded by flowers, books, and the hum of my sewing machine. But now, the silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt peaceful. Every Sunday, Adam and Clara still came to visit. Sometimes they brought dinner, sometimes just laughter. They'd tell me about their week, their dreams, and even their arguments, and I'd listen, smiling, knowing that's what families are supposed to do. Then, one morning, I woke up to a knock on my door. When I opened it, there stood Adam, holding a bouquet of lilies, just like the ones Clara gave me that Mother's Day. He grinned. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom." I laughed softly. "You remembered again." He stepped inside, followed by Clara, who carried a large box wrapped in gold paper. "We thought we'd surprise you," she said. I teased, "Another expensive gift?" Adam shook his head, smiling. "Not this time. This one's different." I opened the box slowly. Inside was a framed photo. It was me, Adam, and Clara, sitting in my garden, all smiling under the golden sunset. Below the picture, engraved in tiny letters, were the words, "Home isn't a place. It's a person." For a long time I couldn't speak. My eyes filled with tears, but my heart felt light, lighter than it had in years. Adam said quietly, "We wanted you to know, you're not just my mother, Mom. You're our home." I looked at him, my voice trembling. "You have no idea how much that means to me." He smiled. "Actually, I think I do." We spent that day together, cooking, laughing, remembering old stories. There was no guilt, no distance. Just love, the way it should be. As the evening came, Adam and Clara left, promising to visit again next weekend. After they drove away, I sat on the porch, the framed photo resting on my lap. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from my garden. I looked up at the sky. It was painted with the same soft colors as that evening a year ago. And I thought about everything, the pain, the waiting, the loneliness, and how, somehow, love had found its way back home. I whispered to myself, maybe every mother's heart breaks a little, but it's the same heart that teaches the world how to love again. A tear slid down my cheek, but this time, it wasn't from sadness. It was from gratitude. For the journey, for the forgiveness, for the simple joy of being a mother. I placed the photo on the table, beside the vase of fresh lilies. The same vase that had stood empty once, now filled with life again. And as I turned off the lights, I smiled. Because I knew, deep inside, that love, no matter how late it comes, always finds its way home. Sometimes, the greatest wealth isn't measured by what our children give us, but by the moments they choose to share. Because a mother's love doesn't need repayment, it just needs to be remembered.